Members, good afternoon. We're now in open session, and our substantive briefings today are the Social Investment Fund and Together Building a United Community. We'll have a briefing from officials on TBUC, and then we will consider a draft plan with regard to our inquiry into the same. Can I also, perhaps unusually, welcome into the public gallery Carter Herdman, who is a student from Dromore High School and is very welcome here today, observing one of his MLAs, no pressure. We have an apology from Michael Copeland. I think some other members, just to make a general point, with the Secretary of State talks on for the rest of the year, potentially, I think she intends to call them on Wednesdays and Thursdays, so it is likely some, if not all, the members of this committee from time to time may be called down to Stormont House or whatever over the next number of weeks. So if there are absences around the table, that is more than likely to be the reason why. Members, on Monday, along with the Chair of the Employment and Learning Committee, Mr. Swan, I met with the Italian Ambassador to the United Kingdom, His Excellency Pascal Terracciano, and we had a very useful and wide-ranging discussion in which he outlined priorities for the Italian presidency of the Council of Europe. These include economic growth and job creation, moving Europe closer to its citizens, and a stronger role for Europe in global foreign policy. I'll pause in case there are any questions.
I'll go say them too.
The legislative consent motion on the childcare payments bill has now been scheduled for debate in plenary, and that's on Tuesday, the 4th of November. Our report on our deliberations with regard to this LCM is available on our webpage, and also hard copy in the business office. The committee has agreed to support the LCM, but we're also recommending the department undertakes a scoping exercise to find out who might be disadvantaged under the new scheme, and where appropriate, what we can do to ensure their needs are addressed within the wider childcare strategy. We'll receive a briefing from officials on the draft childcare strategy on the 5th of November and can obviously explore it further at this time. Just as an aside, we know that employers for childcare lobbied hard on this. I believe they are now focused on Westminster to try and see if they can secure some amendments as the legislation makes its way through the House of Commons. Members content? We move on then to page 6, correspondence from the Assembly and the Executive Review Committee, which is inviting me to chair part of the roundtable discussion at the Women in Politics and the Northern Ireland Assembly event tomorrow. I'm happy to do that. Other members of the committee are also invited to attend. Then at page 10, there's an invitation for the Centre of Effectiveness Services to the launch of a report on their learning from 10 years of prevention and early interventions in children and young people's services. That's Wednesday the 5th of November. It's 11:30 at the Duncairn Centre for Culture and Arts, and we would ask members to respond directly to them if they wish to attend. Page 13 of tabled papers is an invitation to the launch of a report called Beneath the Surface, Child Poverty in Northern Ireland. That's here in Parliament Buildings, 10 a.m. Monday the 3rd of November in the Long Gallery. Again, could I ask members to respond directly if they're intending to go. And a copy of current invitations is at page 13. You may have noticed, members, in your packs, we now have included indicative timings for agenda items, and on the business diary on the Assembly website, once again. This has been implemented following a recommendation by the Committee Review Group. If we are content, we'll move on to item 4, and I'm asking if you are content to agree the draft minutes of the meeting of the 15th of October 2014.
Great.
Thank you. Page 21 then is a list of outstanding correspondence. Pausing for comment, in the absence of which, can I refer you to the correspondence summary sheet, which is on page 24 of your packs. There you'll see correspondence received since our last meeting, and I'll now ask the clerk to highlight items that require a decision by the committee, but of course members are perfectly free to raise any other items of correspondence. Kathy.
Thanks, Chair. The first item I'd like to refer you to is at page 28. It's a note from the Committee for Finance and Personnel on savings delivery plans. That committee received an update briefing recently, and it's just to check if members are content to seek a written update from OFMDFM on their progress of their delivery plans, savings delivery plans.
Great.
The next item is at page 39. It's a buddy scheme update. It's just an update from representatives from the Community Relations and Schools who met recently informally with the Chair and Deputy Chair, and they just wanted to send in an update on action that's been taken since then. It was agreed at the time that this is more applicable to the Committee for Education, so it's just to seek agreement to forward it on to the Committee for Education.
Great.
And moving to the table pack, there are a few items just to refer members to. The first one is at page 16. And it's a correspondence from the Victims and Survivors Service. It's in response to a query about an increase in the number of groups over the last 12 months, but the response indicates that they are actually funding one less group over the past 12 months. Let's just ask if members have any comments. Are you content to note? Then also at page 18 of the table pack, there's correspondence from the Committee for Finance and Personnel. This actually goes back to February this year, and at that stage this committee just noted the memo from that committee, but an ISRA report released last week and indicates that sickness absence in the OFMDFM, they missed their target last year. So it's just to check if members want to forward this on to the department to ask for comment on the reasons why they might have missed the target, and to see if they did indeed, as set out in the memo from that committee, they did contribute to the NIO report.
Can I just say I think this is an issue that we do need to look at and start taking some focus on.
And just finally to mention, at page 21 of table packs, there is correspondence there from Royal Mail regarding competition and mail delivery, and it's in the pack because obviously the committee received it, but I understand that the EDI committee have also received it, and they would be the most appropriate committee to take any issues forward. Apart from that, unless there are no other queries, that's it for correspondence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, members, at our strategic planning day in September, we did agree to take a particular look at the Social Investment Fund during the 14-15 session. And today we have a briefing from departmental officials. So in terms of your background information, the clerk's brief is in your packet, page 41. It includes all projects within the affordable limits, and that's page 43. There are no briefing papers, so the latest update with regard to the Programme for Government Commitments 31 and 32, that's included at page 50. And a briefing paper was provided by OFMDFM at 4:25 p.m. yesterday, and this is available in your table pack at page 30. Can I ask, has any member been able to review that tabled paper pack? No one? No. Okay. So, from the...
Sorry, Chair. Most of it is information that we already know anyway.
It is.
I mean,
Yes.
quick scan of it. I was happy enough with it, so it's not an issue from my point of view.
So we're joined by Ricky Irwin and Orla McStraffic. Just on that point, Ricky, as it's all new, as there is no new information, why was it so late in being provided?
Okay, Chair. Well, no, I appreciate the difficulties that the delay of providing papers to the committee causes. And I apologise for that. I wish that I had been with the committee before now. I suppose there are a range of processes that we have to go through within the department, including discussion on papers, gathering information, and agreeing papers. So beyond that, I can't really offer anything more than an apology.
Apologies accepted. I accepted. I'm just curious, what was the specific delay in this instance, because it's all old info.
Delays were within the department, unfortunately.
Whereabouts?
I can't really offer any more information other than to say the delays were within the department.
Not enlightening, but okay. I'd invite you to make your opening remarks.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee, and thank you for this opportunity to update you on the Social Investment Fund and the progress we're making to deliver projects on the ground. As members will be aware, the Executive set aside £80 million split between capital and revenue for the Social Investment Fund, designed to deliver social change through tackling poverty, unemployment and physical deterioration. We fully appreciate that the time frame has extended and there's a perception that we got off to a slow start. However, this is because we wanted to get it right, and we wanted to avoid rushing to give money out to projects which were simply a quick fix or which had not been fully worked through. Instead, our aim is to invest in projects which are robust, represent value for money, make a difference to those in the most need, and stand a real chance of achieving the expected outcomes, and therefore making a real difference in people's lives. We also needed SIF projects to belong to and have the support of the communities that they were seeking to help, in keeping with the ethos of the bottom-up, community-led approach to SIF. To do this, we had to set up the necessary infrastructure, and that will ensure ongoing engagement and drive as the projects are delivered on the ground. We set up 9 social investment zones, each with the steering group, to identify need and develop projects for implementation in the area. The steering groups have drawn representation from right across the zones and sectors. The steering group submitted their area plans in February of last year, with projects prioritised within them. The steering groups further reviewed the prioritisation on confirmation of funding allocations for each zone in November last year. These projects have been and continue to be robustly assessed through the economic appraisal process, and earlier this year a total of 23 projects were announced as being ready to proceed to letter of offer stage. I'm pleased to report that we now have committed funding to 23 projects, a mixture of revenue and capital across all 9 social investment zones, and this represents a commitment of £34.4 million, or approximately 43% of the total pot available. Projects are starting to get off the ground now. For example, the Northern Zone's Causeway Rural and Urban Network, or CRUN project, is at a construction stage. CRUN is Colerane's first charity hub, and its premises in Brook Street are currently in initial stages of an extensive renovation. The work is expected to be completed in August next year, at which point this one-stop shop for charities and community groups will open its doors for business. Users will have access to training rooms, conference facilities, offices and a shop, and this will help contribute to the achievement of the SIF strategic objective around increasing community services. A number of other capital projects, including the development of Bryson Street Surgery in Belfast East, the development of premises in Sandy Row to create a training and education centre in Belfast South, the development of Fermanagh House in the Western Zone, and a number of revenue employability projects across the zones are well progressed and expected to move to tender in the coming weeks. The others are also making progress, and we're working with lead partners to ensure the conditions in the letters of offer are met and an acceptable project plan, resource plan and monitoring and evaluation framework is in place to enable progression to the next stage quickly. We also have a further 12 projects at the final approval stage, which, subject to budget and sign-off, could proceed to letter of offer quite quickly. They are a mixture of revenue and capital and represent a commitment of a further £18.8 million, which would bring SIF total expenditure to £53.2 million, or approximately 2/3 of the total budget. This represents real progress and significant investment across the zones. There are a further 22 projects across the zones which were prioritised by steering groups within the funding allocation. We are continuing to consider the need value for money, risks and costs associated with a view to determining the best way forward for those projects. Members are aware that across executive departments are facing challenging budgetary conditions and the impact on SIF is not fully known. SAF funding as an executive fund is not in the OFMDFM baseline, but instead part of a consolidated pot held centrally by DFP. We are continuing to monitor the profiling of spend, particularly in respect of revenue projects, and consider in line with the SAF funding allocation provided by DFP on a yearly basis. This will inform decisions on future letters of offer and timeframes for delivery. So to conclude and just to recap, we've made funding commitments to 23 projects with costs in the region of 34.4 million based on the most up-to-date figures as a result of a cost validation exercise. The projects are progressing well and we expect to see actual delivery on the ground very soon. Indeed, some have actually commenced. We will of course keep the committee updated on progress as we move forward. Chair, that's the end of the opening remarks. Happy to take any questions that members would have.
Thank you very much. If I heard you correctly, you've got 12 projects, capital and revenue, which are coming on towards a decision. Can you tell us the geographic spread of those, please?
That's a mix across the zones. I mean, I could get into the specifics. We have one in North Belfast, one in South, one in East, two in West. Then there's one in Derry, Londonderry, two in the Northern Zone, one in South Eastern, one in Southern and one in the Western Zones. Sorry, two in the Western.
Okay, good spread. I'm looking at the programme for government, which is obviously the core document in terms of everything you do. And this £80 million initiative of the SAF is spread over Commitment 31 and Commitment 32. And I suppose if you could boil it down to one word, 31's about £40 million in dereliction, 32's on deprivation. The milestone for this financial year, 2014-15, in both cases is the same: to have achieved £40 million of programme expenditure, 40 million on 31, 40 million on 32, and also to have evaluated the impact of expenditure. And yet nowhere in the last narrative updating progress does it acknowledge the failure to achieve the milestones. Why would that be?
Well, I think, Chair, the financial position has obviously changed since the PFG commitments were made.
And sorry, in what way of
in terms of the financial pressures that are now being faced.
I thought the money was ring-fenced.
The money remains ring-fenced for SIF. However,
so what's the pressure?
But what we have to do is consider the profiling of projects going forward against the money that's available from DFP on a yearly basis.
So the money isn't available. It's ring-fenced, but it's not available.
I didn't say that it wasn't available. I'm just saying that we need to consider the profiling of the projects against the money that's available.
Well, I don't understand what that means. What it says here, to have achieved 40 million of programme expenditure, and it hasn't happened, and the narrative doesn't even acknowledge it hasn't happened. Why is that?
What has happened is 34.4 million of commitments.
But that's not the question, Ricky.
Say it again, sorry?
That's not the question. The question is, why do you not acknowledge in your narrative that you failed to meet your milestone for 2014-15 on Programme for Government Commitment 31 and Programme for Government Commitment 32?
Well, I did say at the start that it has taken longer than we would have hoped to get the fund off the ground because of having to go through setting up the necessary structures, supporting the steering groups to develop the projects, and then we've had to go through a robust economic appraisal process on those projects. Taking all that into account.
Yeah, would it be an idea to actually put those very words into the box that gives the narrative on progress?
Well, we can consider that for future updates then, Chair, yeah.
Okay, Stephen Mitry.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming. You said in your introduction there had been a considerable time lapse in relation to whenever the applications came in, and there has been indeed. What is the department willing to do for groups that have been successful and now find as a result of the time lapse they're going to have an increase in costs for materials and labour when they move forward?
Well, we've gone through a cost validation exercise since original projects were announced earlier this year. Effectively, some costs have increased. For example, on employment programmes, we know that the minimum wage has increased, and that will increase the costs. We also know that in relation to the capital projects, following the cost validation exercises by CPD, some of those costs have indeed increased as well. So we need to validate those costs, and we need to then revise letters of offer and agree those with the lead partners within the budget envelope available for each zone.
Okay. The other question I want to ask is around procurement for the projects. How will that be protected, the integrity of it, and, you know?
The procurement process is different according to the type of project. Maybe, Orla, if you could set that out.
Yeah, I mean, we have a service level agreement with Centre Procurement Directorate within the department, so they're involved with each of the lead partners directly in terms of taking forward the procurements for all of the revenue and the capital projects, so they're supporting them through that whole process to make sure that it's done right.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, thanks, Chair. Okay.
Deputy Chair Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. I declare an interest as a member of the East Belfast Area Steering Panel and ask the question in my capacity as a member of the committee. In terms of the not reaching the milestone for this financial year, I think your introductory comments were that there's a perception that progress has been slow. I think any objective analysis of that would find that an outrageous comment, to be honest, given how far we are behind that milestone. But can you state when you think that milestone of full expenditure of the fund and evaluation of the outcome of the expenditure will be likely to be achieved?
I couldn't go into detail. I couldn't predict it because we basically have 3 cohorts of project. We have the ones where the commitment is there now. That's the 23. We have a further 12 which are imminent, and then we have a final 22 projects. And we're exploring options in relation to those 22 projects, which have taken longer to come through the process. So I wouldn't want to speculate in terms of trying to guess when that would be.
So as it stands, then the milestone of achieving that by 14-15 is now indefinite.
We'll need to look at how obviously we report against that. Yeah.
Okay. And can you advise how the reports make reference to the lead partners in the area zones? Can you advise how the lead partners have been identified and appointed?
We asked steering groups when they were submitting their area plans early last year to identify potential lead partners for each project. So the steering groups provided that information.
Okay, and can you advise what the role is in terms of administering the funds that goes to the lead partners in terms of delivery bodies then? Will there be another separate process for identification of organisations to deliver the projects?
Again, yes, that depends on the type of project, whether it's capital or revenue, and I'll let Orla explain that.
Yeah, I mean, capital's going to be procurement for your design team and your contractor and the rest of it. The ones that are letter of offer at the minute, they're also going down the procurement route, so they will be working with CPD to actually procure a service delivery agent to deliver the programme.
Okay, and is there a management fee payable to the lead partners then?
There is in some instances, not in all of them. It depends on the actual project and what the lead partner's role actually is. In some instances, some of the capital projects, for example, are clusters where it's maybe the lead partner isn't actually the beneficiary of any of the capital builds or extensions or refurbs, so they're playing a role for the department in terms of monitoring and reporting on our behalf and actually carrying out the procurements, etc. So there will be actual costs associated with that. It's not a management fee on you'll get a certain percentage. There is a cap, but it will be actual costs incurred as a result of the organisation carrying out that role.
So the management fees could vary then?
Yeah, it'll depend on the project, yeah. There's not a set amount.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome. Jimmy Spratt.
Chair, just on the length of time that this has taken, and I welcome the projects in South Belfast that have been approved, particularly the facility for the care nursery at Tuckmona. Initially, the consultants who dealt with the steering groups, they made a real mess and a horlicks of the whole projects, didn't they?
There were a number of consultants who were appointed across the zones. There were one consultants firm that covered the 4 zones in Belfast. There were varying...
They made a mess, Ricky. The question I'm asking you is they made an absolute horlicks of the whole thing.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily accept that there was a mess made, no.
Well, that's what the perception of the people on the steering groups is.
Well, what we have are 4 area plans in Belfast with 10 projects within each area plan, and we're now moving forward with those projects, including the 3 in South Belfast that
Yeah, well, let me
you've
take you
referred
back.
to.
That's just not the, I understand what's in South Belfast, and I've already welcomed that. What I'm trying to get to is the length of time and the messing about that the consultants caused in relation to, and I understand they were paid. I want to know how much they were paid, how much they were paid for flawed work, how much extra time it cost in relation to that flawed work in terms of holding the whole system up, holding the whole project up to the extent. I know in the south area, some people were very close to walking away from the steering groups.
Just to come back on that, I fully accept that we did have issues with consultants, absolutely, and we try to manage those on an ongoing basis. And we have,
Was this firm fully paid for the
No.
less than credible work that they did?
No, that firm was not fully paid.
If I could just come in on that, they were contracted through CPD in the normal way, and we
Yeah.
went through CPD in terms of what was met, in terms of the tender requirements and what wasn't, and the payments, etc., were liaised with CPD to agree that. But I think in terms of the whole process, there's lessons learned for us as a department in terms of how we used the consultants, how the tender was done, and what the outcome of it was, and that's certainly something that we would want to feed into any future similar process that would be gone across. So yes, whilst we accept there was issues and there has been hold-ups in the economic appraisals.
Well, there was more than issues, it was pretty serious issues, quite frankly, and they were very poor, to say the least. I'll take it no further than that. The question I'm asking you is, how much were that firm of consultants, how much were they paid? Much was the original asking price, if you like, that was agreed under CPD to do the work? How much, so that you have an original estimate, then you had a payment, like you have already told us that that amount wasn't paid in full. So can you tell us what that amount is? And can you tell us, in terms of future work, that under no circumstances will this organisation be asked to do any future work, given the total haulage that they made?
I'm not sure. I don't have the figures with me. We can certainly get that to you if we don't have it now. The contracts with all the consultants have finished. There is no further work.
Well, that's
with
fair enough,
SIF.
but that says to me that you paid the bills. But if there were issues, some of the work might have been done okay, but it wasn't just the South Belfast area. My understanding in the southern area as well, there were similar issues with the lead consultants. So what I want to know is that we didn't pay good money for what was pathetic and poor work. As a public representative, we're entitled to know that, and I think the committee are entitled to know that. And I think you need to supply those figures to the committee.
Absolutely,
in terms of all of that.
No, absolutely. No, we can supply the figures. There's no problem at all. As Orla said, there were a number of lessons that we've learned from this contract with those consultants, and it would not be done.
Well, I mean, in terms of those lessons, I think it's fair for the committee to ask you, what were those lessons? And if those lessons have been learned, have they been taken out of OFMDFM silo and shared with other departments so that other departments aren't caught in the same trap with similar sort of second-rate consultants?
Second-rate consultancy work on this occasion.
Yeah.
I mean, on the consultant side, I think the issues probably boiled down to one particular aspect of the work, which was the economic appraisal side. We would have done the monitoring of the contract throughout with CPD. A lot of the other work they were actually paid to do was the consultation, the engagement process, the work with the steering groups, which a lot of the steering groups across the board were happy with and actually, you know, commended the consultants for doing. So the specific element that I think the majority of the problems arose from was the economic appraisals, and that's a bit where we would have looked at the spend for and capped the spend in line with what we felt met the contractual requirements. But certainly we can get, you know, provide that information.
Yeah, yep.
But I think it's important to look at it in the whole, that, you know, it wasn't the whole contract that was a problem, it might have been just one particular element of it. And in terms of the lessons learned, we are looking at that, and we would be wanting to share that with other departments.
But the other issue is, how long did that hold up the work? Because some work had to be done over again, is my understanding, in terms of some of the economic appraisals. So, you know, if you can give us some idea, it might be good if we could get that in writing, Chair.
I am amazed, Jimmy, if I can join in here. You know, surely a key role for a consultant in terms of advising a zonal advisory panel would be in helping them with the technical task of drawing up an economic appraisal, and yet even working with central procurement, with CPD, somebody who was employed who failed to meet a minimum standard on an EA, that is shocking, I have to say.
It's not that they didn't meet the minimum standards, it's that maybe the economic appraisals didn't meet the full requirements of what we expected in terms of the tender.
Well, you're dancing on a pin there for me.
It's not just one consultant, you know, I'm not having to go at one particular consultancy firm. There are, I mean, when I talk about lessons learned, I think it's important to reflect on, we have lessons learned in terms of how the tender was done and the tender requirements and what was put in there and what role maybe the consultants should actually have played.
Well, you can't take full responsibility for that. If you worked with CPD, then surely central procurement failed.
Well, no, they did the tender on our behalf, but we would have input to the tender specification.
So you didn't take their advice on how to tender?
Oh, we did, of course, yes, but it would have been what
Well, did they not say to you this tender isn't properly written?
No, it's not that. I'm not saying that the tender wasn't the way it was written. It's maybe what we envisaged the consultants would do from the start as the process went on. Maybe that wasn't the right role for the consultants, and we should have had them doing something slightly different. And that
So
will
who did you consult before you decided what you wanted of the consultancies?
Well, I mean, this was in discussion with CPD in terms of the best way to procure consultants.
So Orla said you didn't do that.
No, we work with CPD on all the tender documentation.
Yeah,
we have to. That's part and parcel. But from the department's perspective, I suppose we said I'd intended to do the area planning process and thought we would have consultants in to support the steering groups. Maybe we didn't tie down that role as specifically as we might have wanted, or maybe in hindsight we might have wanted them to do something slightly different than we did at the time.
But CPD at no point said to you, I think you might need to rethink this because they might not be able to deliver what you want, or what you're asking for isn't actually what you need?
No.
Oh, disappointing. Chris, you want back in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think the principle of engaging grassroots community in establishing, do I need to declare an interest again?
Okay.
The using grassroots community and establishing need in relation to deprivation and dereliction is a good principle. I think if I'm picking up on what Jimmy's saying is that the process by which, and even by what you're saying yourselves, the process by which that was undertaken has not worked out as well as people would have liked it to, and it may well have significantly fueled the significant delays that have taken place in terms of expenditure. If I'm understanding Jimmy, and he's well able to correct me, you've put forward a narrative that poor consultancy work was significant, if not a major contributor to that. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that.
I'm not suggesting a major contributor, I didn't suggest that.
Okay, that's why I said you're able to correct me. You've said there may have been issues around tender terms of reference. I would like to consider whether the time given to consultants to consult with communities, engage with communities, call for applications, turn those applications from community groups that may have never had any experience with economic appraisals into Green Book economic appraisal standards was actually reasonable as well. If we're going to make the types of expressions of serious concern that we have, then maybe there's a need to actually look at that process in a bit more detail to find out what actually did or didn't happen, because there are some pretty serious comments being made in relation to it.
Just to pick up on that, that's the point I was trying to make in relation to the tender process. You know, we set time frames, we set specific elements of work to be done at specific times. There's lessons learned in that from us, from our perspective, in terms of what we were actually asking them to do. And I mean, you would know yourself, the area planning time frame was actually extended by a month at one point, due to the fact that we were getting feedback that it wasn't enough time for people to actually robustly consult and develop the project. So there's a lot of lessons learned that we need to capture.
I think it's helpful to state that, and you might, you know, if we're serious, we might want to hear from consultants or people that were involved in that process to better understand how that process did or didn't work, given it's such a crucial aspect of what you're trying to do here, i.e. engage the community in tackling deprivation and dereliction, which otherwise has previously been done by a Department for Social Development. Indeed, there are some debates as to whether it's actually not a way to actually do this, and it should have been done the other way. So maybe that is something to look at, Chair.
Yeah, I think after this session, I think it would be useful if we have a conversation about what we might like to ask more formally in terms of these things. But what I'm just interested, you know, you're saying that, for example, you put a timeline on something being done and then found out it was unrealistic, you needed to give another month. How did you come to decide the original timeline? Who did that?
Can you remember?
This was back after the formation of the steering groups in the middle of 2012. We took advice from CPD in terms of how best to go about procurement. We shared with them all the procurement documentation, including the timescales, the individual tasks within each of the tenders, and we determined that the amount of time that was set aside at that point was deemed reasonable. Now, when we started that process, we got feedback which said we would like a bit more time. So we responded to that and we extended it by a month.
And that was the advisory group saying, can we have more time?
It was
the steering groups and through the council.
CPD signed off effectively on the original timeline.
The original tender.
They signed off on all the original documentation, yes.
Right. So I go back to my original point. If there's a fault here, it is not just the departments, not just yourselves, but they are complicit because they had the opportunity to say, as experts in this area, we think you need to give another month here, 6 weeks there, but they didn't do that. Okay. Stephen, you...
Yeah, thank you very quickly. Can I ask, are you aware, have there been many resignations of the steering group?
Not too many,
There've been
handful.
a few, yeah.
Okay.
I think there's only been, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it's a
And
small
has
number.
anyone done any work as to why people have resigned?
Well, I haven't personally looked at it, but we could look at it. I mean, I know some people have resigned because of various other commitments.
Yeah, there's only one, I think there's one or two have come in very recently, and I don't know the detail of the reason.
I
for
think
that.
it may be worthwhile following up, because I'm aware that the Southern Group, the level of frustration is that great that they usually can't get a quorum to meet.
Okay.
So they can't. So I think there's something needs to be followed up when people are given of their time, you know, to come. There's obviously an issue there that has built up over a considerable period of time, and I would suggest that you do some work and find out what the problem is there.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, I think we're about done. But just on the advisory panels, obviously the panels were just being made up of representatives of public sector, voluntary sector and the business community. Did any business people ever come to be appointed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All as intended?
I don't think they have all of them, but the majority of them are appointed, yeah.
So which panels never got a business community input?
Well, we don't have the breakdown. That's probably something
I know
we would
there's
need to-
definitely one zone, but I'm not sure which one it is, but we can give you that information.
Yeah, we would
Okay,
need to
well,
speak
look,
to that separately.
I think what we might do is we'll have a conversation now and we'll maybe write with some specifics and
Okay.
possibly include that with it. Members content?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Ricky, thank you very much indeed. Jimmy, I know you're not a great fan of long letters to departments, but I think in this case maybe a more structured approach to this might be the way forward.
Well, I mean, just to take up on the points that Chris made, I mean, my main concern in all of this is that mistakes were made if the company or consultancy wasn't up to scratch. I think there's issues for the future in terms of, they've accepted that there's lessons to be learned, but I think we need to know what those lessons are. I think we also need to know, what I want to know is that I suspect that there was a figure, ballpark figure, that this consultancy was going to cost. Didn't work out. Mistakes were made, which caused serious problems within steering groups who had been, Stephen said, working, as Chris will know, those steering groups worked hard and did a very good job in doing what they did. And I mean, I would want to be assured that the fees were appropriately docked, because it is public purse money, and I think we're entitled to know that. And you don't pay for something, if you're a customer in something, you don't pay for something that's second hand or second rate.
Yep.
So the bottom line is, for the future, no, we can't do much about this now, but for the future there needs to be very robust stuff in place that doesn't create the problems that certainly in some areas it seemed to have created, except in other areas maybe there wasn't a problem. But
Yep, I agree.
so I mean, I'm maybe a fan of letters, but I'm a fan of a letter, maybe in this case, to get some answers.
Thought you might be. So a member's content if we work on a letter to probe the assessment of where it went wrong and whether an appropriate level of recompense was sought in terms of the docking fees. I would also be keen just to get the department's view on the role of CPD on central procurement, because it may be that it was new work, and they, in all honesty, said that time frame was as good a guess as they could give. But if they should have known better, again, I think it's something we need to be aware of.
Chair, could I just ask, you've identified key people involved in the issue there, the department, and I think the officials in Ord in particular was helpful, and Frank and CPD, but there are some fairly serious comments being attached to other organisations here who, in the proposal that you have, will have no right to contribute whatsoever, and I'm just wondering how, given the level of seriousness of comments that are being attributed to some of those organisations, what opportunity they have to contribute to any review of this process?
Sure. Well, I think, I hope we're being clear, Chris, that it is a question, and it's not even an accusation, because the officials have confirmed that the work was not up to the level required, and we've been clear to say that this is about consultancy work performed rather than the consultancy firm itself.
When you have, I think it'd be a rare occasion where we would not seek to hear from an organisation that level of concern was being expressed
Well,
about.
I think that's going another step. I mean, I think it's between the department and the supplier, for whom there was a contractual relationship. We are simply operating our oversight, our scrutiny function, in terms of saying, you've said you employed people to do a job, you have said that the job was not to your satisfaction, you have said you have withheld part of the contractual monies on that behalf. We would like more detail of that. I've got to say, Chris, I think that's reasonable. If we were going beyond that to impinge the company, that would be an issue, but we're not. We're saying this company, on this occasion, has performed at a substandard level by the assessment of the officials of OFMDFM.
Who are facing some pretty serious questions in terms of the
Yes,
failure to be
yeah, sure,
in general,
sure.
and will be needing to find excuses for that.
Yeah, well, I've got to say, I accept that the officials are more than capable of accepting criticism, but I have to say, if I was the managing director of the company for whom money had been withheld, I would be going to my lawyers, and I hear no word of that. if the withholding of monies on a contract were not justified in view of the company, you would expect the company to take the normal course of action.
Fair enough.
Okay. Okay, so we'll work on something. Thank you very much, members. Now, as part of our inquiry into building a united community, we agreed to invite officials to brief us on progress of TBUC. We'd also requested a briefing paper from Assembly Research, specifically on the Community Relations Funding Framework for Northern Ireland. That's available, members, from page 58. It includes information on grant awards from the Community Relation Council for 2011-12 and 12-13, and it's across a whole number of programmes. That information begins at page 65, along with the allocation from OFMDFM for District Council Good Relations programmes, and that covers financial years 2011 to 2015 and all council areas. That's at page 108. So we'll have a lot of background briefing stats there, members. And then the latest update with regard to the Programme for Government Commitment number 67 is at page 112 of your packs. Beyond that, a briefing paper was provided by OFMDFM at 5 p.m. Yesterday, and this is obviously in tabled papers rather than your pack, and it is at page 36. At this point, does any member wish to declare an interest with regard to TBUC? I don't think it's likely, but I don't think so. Okay. No, so we welcome Donna Blaney, Michael McGinley and Lindsay Farrell to committee. Lindsay, 5 p.m. yesterday. What was the issue with a late delivery of paper?
No issue other than that was the time that it was issued on behalf of ministers.
On behalf of ministers?
Ministers cleared the briefing.
At 5 p.m. yesterday. When was the briefing put to them for clearance?
I don't have the exact date that we put it up to private office.
Roughly?
About a week to 10 days ago. I can check the exact date and get back to you.
I would be interested, because again, I don't think there's anything sort of contentious about the paper, so therefore why should we not get it in a timely manner, as we'd spent a lot of effort in the last 12 months liaising with the head of the civil service, the junior ministers, the principal ministers about timely papers.
I'll check the exact date.
Thank you. Would you care to make some opening remarks?
Okay. Thank you, Chair, for your introduction and for the invitation to appear here today to update the committee on progress with implementing Together Building a United Community. The strategy, as you know, was published on the 23rd of May last year, following the announcement of 7 strategic headline actions by the First Minister and Deputy First Minister. We had the opportunity to brief the committee back in February of this year, and we welcome the opportunity today to provide a further update. The strategy sets out a range of actions and commitments against 4 strategic priorities: our children and young people, our shared community, our safe community and our cultural expression. However, the range of commitments and actions extend well beyond these 7, and in total they're in the region of 42 other actions and commitments which compositely will contribute to achieving our collective vision of a shared, united and reconciled community. With the agreement of members, I propose to focus today on progress against the 7 headline actions, the delivery architecture required to monitor implementation and other key commitments arising from the strategy. Members of the committee have already acknowledged that they've received a copy of a briefing paper in advance of today's meeting, and hopefully you'll have been given an opportunity to look at the areas I will cover in this briefing today. SROs for the 7 headline actions have been appointed by departments with lead responsibility, and compositely they make up the membership of the Good Relations Programme Board, which to date has met on 6 occasions. This Programme Board reports directly to the Ministerial Panel on implementation and delivery of the strategy. So we move to the first headline action. They're in no particular order, the first of which is the United Youth Programme. The design day on the 23rd of January that the committee was made aware of at our last visit here was the culmination of an extensive period of stakeholder engagement with almost 300 participants attending. The co-design process begun by OFMDFM at that stage is now being continued by the lead department, the Department for Employment and Learning. DEL has appointed a United Youth Advisor to take forward the next design stage. And this process is being supported by a design team, which comprises representatives from a number of departments and statutory agencies. Young people have been engaged with separately up to this point, and it's intended they will shortly also be invited to become part of the design team. The design team has produced a draft outcomes and principles framework, and this will be tested during the forthcoming 2015 pilot phase. I'd also like to say that OFMDFM funded the first United Youth pilot through the Central Good Relations Fund, with 50 young people taking part in the Head Start initiative, with very positive findings from the evaluation of that initiative so far. The Department of Education leads on the headline action of 10 shared education campuses. The department received 16 expressions of interest under the programme, and the Minister announced the first three projects to be supported on the 1st of July of this year. Those three projects are St Mary's High School Limavady and Limavady High School, a shared educational campus for Moy Regional Primary School and St John's Primary School Moy, and a shared educational campus for Ballycastle High School and Cross and Passion College Ballycastle. These projects will now proceed to the planning stage, and the target is to have 3 business cases submitted and approved by the end of 2014. A second call for applications opened on the 1st of October, and the deadline for submissions for further proposals is 30th of January of 2015. In addition to this, good progress is also being made in the Lissanelli Shared Education Campus programme, which is over and above the 10 shared education campuses. In terms of urban villages, the Department for Social Development is leading on the coordination of that headline action. A high-level design specification has been developed, and the first 2 locations identified are Colin and Lower Newtonards Road. A strategic board has been set up to meet on a monthly basis, which is chaired by OFMDFM junior ministers, and its membership includes representatives from DSD, OFMDFM, SIB and Belfast City Council. Resources were secured through June monitoring to allow SIB to take forward the all-important stakeholder engagement work to enable work to continue in the 2 urban village locations. In terms of the 100 summer schools and camps, OFMDFM is responsible for taking forward work on this headline action. A number of summer schools and camps have already taken place during this summer, and further schemes are scheduled for the Halloween midterm break. An additional £300,000 was secured in June monitoring to enable further work on summer schools and camps, and Belfast City Council and the Department of Education will be running further schemes and pilots, primarily at the Halloween time. Expressions of interest have also been invited from other councils, and decisions on those will be taken in the coming weeks. A programme board has been established to oversee progress on this headline action, and the board had its first meeting on the 18th of August. External members of the board from DE, Belfast City Council and CRC, and we've just secured agreement for YouthNet to also be represented on that board. OFMDFM has worked very closely with Belfast City Council, and a consultant has been identified and appointed to carry out an evaluation of the schemes that have taken place, and this evaluation will inform the final design of the Summer Schools and Camps programme. Co-design workshops are planned for early December with a range of key stakeholders, and we would hope to engage specifically with young people as part of that process. In terms of the 10 shared neighbourhoods, the Department for Social Development is leading on this work, and through an initial scoping exercise has identified potential sites and a timeline. 11 potential sites have been identified, which could deliver over 600 social homes, but the department is also exploring major mixed tenure developments through joint ventures between housing associations and private developers. The first social housing development at Ravenhill Road is scheduled to open shortly, and construction works have commenced on a further 3 sites. In terms of the cross-community sports programme, DCAL has been appointed to take forward this headline action, and the purpose of the programme is to use sport as a tool in building good relations across our community and break down divisions. Pilot will be delivered during this financial year, and it will be in areas which have experienced specific interface tensions and significant deprivation. In terms of the headline action on the removal of interface barriers by 2023, work on the removal of barriers commenced in 2011, and DOJ has been taking forward a lot of that work both before then and since that date. Design proposals are in an advanced stage to start work towards establishing a 10-year programme to reduce and eventually remove the interface barriers, with the important point that working very closely with the local community. The number of interface structures has been reduced from 59 to 53, and engagement is currently ongoing and very active within 40 of the 53 remaining areas. There's been some positive developments in this area. Security fencing was removed from North City Business Park in April of this year and from Moyard Crescent in May of this year. And the upper vehicle and pedestrian gates at Spring Martin Road were removed in August of this year. So that brings me to the end of the updates on the 7 headline actions. I'll now briefly bring the committee up to date with progress on other aspects, including the Equality and Good Relations Commission. The strategy included a commitment to establish a commission that would act as an independent, statutorily based organisation to provide policy advice and a challenge to government. Following a Gateway project management review, a transition board was established to oversee the change management process relating to the establishment of the new commission. The membership of the board includes the chairs of ECNI and CRC, OFMDFM representatives and representatives from DSO, along with an independent member. The objective of the board is to ensure that TBOC objectives relating to the establishment of the Commission are successfully delivered within an agreed timescale. Members of the Transition Board are currently concentrating on exploring approaches to delivering the relevant TBOC objectives in advance of the new primary legislation being enacted. In terms of the Good Relations review of funding, this was a core commitment given in Together Building a United Community. The review was taken forward in 2 phases. Phase 1 concluded at the end of March this year, and the SIB team, who were commissioned to take forward the work, drew upon existing evaluation and review material to inform Phase 2, which involves substantial stakeholder engagement, including 4 geographic sessions held across Belfast, the North West, Mid-Ulster and Fermanagh, which in total were attended by 144 participants. A final session in Crumlin Road Jail involved a further 112 participants. Feedback was extremely positive through those sessions, and stakeholders reported being very welcoming the opportunity to engage. The second phase of the review ended at the end of June. And since then, we've been working closely with SIB to finalise the report, which will go to ministers shortly, and further engagement with stakeholders will be taken forward on foot of ministers' consideration of the report. And before I conclude, I can also report that the ministerial panel has met on 2 occasions. It's the central part of the delivery architecture set up to drive forward and oversee the implementation of Together Building a United Community. As I mentioned at the outset of my comments, this panel is supported by a Good Relations Programme Board, which comprises senior responsible owners from all departments, not just those with responsibility from headline actions, but all departments. This group has now met 6 times, and the next meeting is planned for mid-November. Work is also at an advanced stage to establish the range of thematic subgroups outlined within Together Building a United Community, and compositely these structures will drive forward on the implementation and facilitate a fresh approach to stakeholder engagement and collaborative leadership on building good relations across our community. I do welcome the committee's ongoing interest in the implementation of a strategy which I think we'll all agree is of vital importance to everyone across our society, and we look forward to working closely with the committee as the implementation phase develops across all strands of the strategy. Thank you again for the opportunity, and happy to take any questions.
Lindsay, thank you very much. A very comprehensive and welcome brief. It is a very exciting strategy. Could you update us on the budget, please?
Yes, certainly. Over the period, we have allocated good relations funding of almost 10 million in this year. All OFMDFM funding streams application criteria have been closely aligned with the 4 key themes of the strategy, as I outlined earlier, to ensure that projects being delivered by our stakeholders are focused on the delivery of the strategy's objectives. As I also mentioned, a number of departments were successful in securing money through June monitoring as well. That was OFMDFM, DCAL and DOJ, and that money was secured specifically to take forward work on Together Building a United Community.
Okay, what's the budget for the 10 shared campuses?
The 10 shared campuses, again, because DE is leading on that, I don't have that information here, but I can find and write back to you on that, the specific budget. Okay,
this is 10 shared campuses beside Lissanelli, which is going ahead. The cost of Lissanelli is, as far as I know, £120 million. So if we take that as the template, then this one of 7 TBUC initiatives, 10 shared campuses, is going to cost £1.2 billion. Lindsay, I put it to you, we don't have it.
Yeah, and that is something that has been under consideration by the ministerial panel.
So you
as I
accept we
said.
don't have that money?
We accept that there is an issue with resourcing across all departments.
And I tell you what the issue is, the money doesn't exist.
Yes, but what we're looking at and working with departments very closely and actively on is assessing what level of resource they need each year so that we have a very detailed profile and that we interrogate those figures very closely to ensure that what departments are telling us, we put a degree of realism on that and we also match it with what's available. It was noted at the last ministerial panel meeting that relying on the normal budgetary processes of applying and monitoring rounds is putting departments in a very difficult position. And with that in mind, we'll be discussing it in more detail at the next ministerial panel meeting when a more detailed analysis of the resource implications will be brought to that meeting.
This is in the context of the Executive having to go to Treasury exceptionally and ask for a loan of 100 million, which is less than the cost of one of the 10 shared campuses, which is one of only 7 initiatives under TBUC. I put it to you again, the money does not exist for Together Building a United Community.
We accept it's a very difficult and challenging public expenditure environment, and that has been noted by all departments at the ministerial panel. But as I said, we are working proactively with departments to produce that realistic financial data that we need, but also to look at what work can be taken forward on a no-cost, low-cost basis. I accept a lot of the headline actions require huge amounts of expenditure, but in terms of the shared educational campuses, for example, the ethos of those is sharing. So that's what we're working with departments around now in terms of looking at outcomes, what we can achieve from the resources that are available to us, but notwithstanding the huge challenge that is still before us and the need for us to constantly be putting up the need for financial resources to support this. And that's why we're doing that work through departments, through the programme board and at the ministerial panel.
So you're asking departments what is achievable in the short term?
We're looking at short term, medium term and longer term.
Right. What I'm hearing is that there's an acceptance that there isn't the money to do these big ambitious projects, but we will do what we can.
No, I think what we're accepting is that there's a scalability issue, and it's about looking at how we roll it out, the timing of rollout, absolutely not going back from the challenge that's been put forward for us and Together Building a United Community, but recognising the challenging context that we're all in. And departments are fully committed to that.
Is there a timeline for digging the sod for the 10 campuses?
That's what we're working with departments to look at. In terms of costs, in terms of the resources available to us, we need a detailed timeline from you and an analysis of those initial costs. A lot of the costs, as you can appreciate, and DA is a good example of this, the costs were very much estimates before the call for expressions of interest. So at that stage, the department couldn't I suppose, accurately anticipate what would come forward in those applications. Now that those 3 applications have come in and there'll be a second call, there'll be a lot more information and data to go on for the department to make a very accurate assessment of the resource requirements and a more realistic and accurate timeline associated with that. And it's that sort of exercise and work that we're taking forward with all departments.
Yeah. It's over a year and a half. It's over 18 months since OFMDFM said to the people of Northern Ireland, be of good heart, we've got a great idea, we're going to build 10 new shared school campuses. A year and a half later, you don't have the money, you don't have the timeline,
but
you don't have anything to give the people.
There are very clear projects that have been submitted and accepted by the Department of Education. They've committed to completing the business cases by the end of this year. There's a second call out for those shared educational campuses. I think that sends out a very clear message in terms of DE's commitment, but also the Executive's commitment to this good relations agenda. And yes, we all accept the difficult economic climate that we're in, but that is not an excuse for inaction or for us to do nothing. And I think we have lots of evidence of the amount of work that has gone in across all departments to continue and to push forward this agenda.
I remain of the view the money doesn't exist. But anyway, Deputy Chair Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. I would agree. I've obviously been on record before in saying that I believe the strategy is inadequate. I still don't see a comprehensive action plan or targets, deadlines with budget allocations, so it's very difficult for the public or MLAs to assess progress in that context. I think it's weaker than the shared future strategy, which had a triennial action plan attached to it. But to engage with what is available to us in relation to the shared educational campuses, there were 16 expressions of interest and 3 projects awarded some type of funds, whatever they are. What was the selection criteria used to make those decisions?
Again, as DE was in the lead responsibility, they set those criteria, but what DE has advised is the Minister of Education was very keen to ensure that the chosen projects would be of a high standard and meet all the criteria that they'd set. So to ensure the best chance of successful, long-term and sustainable collaboration among the schools involved, the Minister wanted to ensure that the projects were building on a foundation of sharing that had already been established in those 3 areas, and that there would be support in the local community for the proposals. So it's my understanding that was the basis of the choice of those 3, and that's why only 3 were picked from the 16 that were submitted, and a decision was taken to go out for a second call.
And are unsuccessful, but maybe I didn't catch there, but are unsuccessful proposals being assisted to try and develop into successful proposals?
I'm not
then?
totally sure of that, but we can go back to the department and find out what the process is for doing that.
Okay. In terms of the urban villages, I'm not clear on what an urban village is, but I'm not going to ask you to tell me either, because that might take a while. What 2 urban villages have been selected? What was the criteria used to select those 2 areas, Newton Ards Road and Colin? And I've endeavoured to seek clarification, but I'm not sure I've ever got it. Does the Newton Ards Road urban village include the area of Short Strand?
Well, the core aspects of the urban village concept were to create community space, improve the area and its aesthetics, and provide a range of uses within the area, and to create the community focus, hence the term urban village. In terms of Colin and the Lower Newton Ards Road, it was felt that those areas met those criteria in terms of work that had been done previously, or the levels of deprivation in the area or community infrastructure. In terms of the actual boundaries of the urban villages, that's still being considered with relation to the Lower Newton Ards Road, so I can seek some certainty around that and get back to you on that point.
I think that would be helpful, and I'm a bit concerned now, and I don't know about my 5th question of that nature, that no one has been able to answer that just yet. It would seem quite strange that a strategy seeking to build a united community would identify an area as an urban village and not encompass an area of interface tension within that urban village, but maybe you can clarify that for us. In terms of the shared neighbourhoods, it says that 11 potential sites have been identified. Do you know what those sites are and what criteria was used to select those?
Yeah, we can get a list sent to you in terms of the 11. I can tell you that the construction works have commenced on Ravenhill Phase 2, Feldon Mill, Newton Abbey and Crossgar Saintfield. In terms of the total list of the 11 sites, I can get that from DSD and report it back to the committee.
Okay, in terms of the ministerial panel, it says that membership has been widened to include local government, voluntary and community sector and key statutory organisations.
That's right.
Do you know what those organisations are?
Yes, the ministerial panel held a meeting on the 2nd of October, and at that meeting NICFA were represented. Local government were also invited, but unfortunately had to send apologies. That was through Solus NI, and the housing executive also nominated a representative onto the ministerial panel. It will also be the intention that once the thematic subgroups are established, that the chairs of those groups will be represented in the ministerial panel to ensure other voices and perspectives and good relations are at the table.
Okay, were the Community Relations Council approached in terms of membership of the ministerial panel?
They weren't for that last meeting, but that's something we're actively considering within the context of establishing the Equality and Good Relations Commission.
Okay, is it possible also, Chair, to get a list of where the summer schools took place in the summer of 2014 and the budget that was allocated to them?
I can do that.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Do you know the number of summer schools off the top of your head?
125 They wouldn't all be exactly class summer schools or camps, but there's summer interventions involving children and young people, and will inform the design of the pure summer schools camps next year.
125.
So far.
Would any of those have happened anyway?
A number of them will have happened anyway. Our planned interventions programme, but then we've allocated an additional 300,000 to interventions to be delivered that will.
So how many of the 125 would have happened anyway this summer?
I don't know in terms of the money. It's 3 in terms of the numbers of camps, but certainly our baseline budget for that would have been 300,000.
Right, but you know there were 125
Have
summer
been
camps.
delivered to date, yes.
But you don't know how many would have happened anyway? Surely you know.
In terms of the numbers, it's just where the funding came through. We had baseline funding of 300, then we increased the level of funding to deliver some more. But I just don't have the breakdown of that with me, but we can get that for you.
It would be, and we also understand that some of the questions you're being asked mean you have to liaise with other departments, and therefore we can't expect you to come back in 10 days. You may need a bit longer. Appreciate that. David McElveen.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back to the budgetary side of things. I mean, obviously a lot of Together Building United Community progress that has happened already has been underwritten through groups such as through Peace Monies, through Atlantic Philanthropies and other organisations. On the basis of just coming back to these 10 campuses, how much government money do you expect to be short by in order to take these projects forward? And has there been any commitments from other organisations to support? Because it obviously does sound like a colossal amount of money when you're talking about 120 million per campus. So how is that money actually broken down? How much of it is coming from the department? How much of it is then being sourced from other places?
And that's actually part of the exercise we're taking forward with departments at the minute. We're asking them for their profile for each year, but also then where they have sought funding from alternative sources. For example, should that be Piece 4 when it's operational, to identify where they and what the amount is, if that's relevant, and then to assess the funding gap from there. So that's something we're taking forward with departments across all the headline actions.
So the success or failure of these projects is not solely based on the executive budget, is that what you're saying?
Not solely. There will be alternative sources of funding in some cases.
Okay, and then there was also a point raised a little bit earlier just about Community Relations Council, and it was something I wanted to raise anyway. There were some comments recently, and I'm paraphrasing maybe slightly, but it was certainly suggesting that not enough was being done in relation to good relations and so on. A figure that was passed to me or was discussed with me was that since the Belfast Agreement there had been somewhere in the region of about £3 billion spent in promoting good relations in Northern Ireland. Is that a figure that you recognise, and if it's not, would you have any figures that have been estimated within the department that would suggest how much money has been spent?
Yeah, I have certainly heard that figure referenced before, and also the figure of in and around 36 to 40 million over the current CSR period, and that's just in terms of what OFMDFM has directly invested in terms of promoting good relations. That's not taking into account the external funding organisations like Peace, and also, you know, OFMDFM provides match funding with Peace as well, so there's a significant contribution on behalf of the department to that also. But I mean, even more recently, through June monitoring, we in the department allocated an additional 220,000 to the Community Relations Council to support good relations activity on the ground through its Pathfinder scheme, and 70,000 of that was specifically targeted towards race hate interventions in light of recent circumstances as well. So I don't think the department would accept that it hasn't been showing leadership on this issue, and I mean, we can clearly show 1.4 million has been made available to this year to the Central Good Relations Fund, and again that's going straight to the ground to the delivery of good relations work. Community groups and practitioners are taking forward this work, and a lot of that's being delivered through the Community Relations Council.
Okay, very helpful, thank you Chair.
Okay, thank you, David. Just to follow up, Lindsay, because this is a Hansard officially recorded session. In terms of the budgets for those 10 campuses,
yes.
David was asking a very valid question about other potential sources of income. I think David mentioned Atlantic Philanthropies, you mentioned Piece 4. You did, as I heard you did say that other sources would 100% for sure contribute to the creation of these campuses. Are you content that that goes on the record?
Explored as opportunities.
Well, see, I think you...
But I mean, we can't give any certainty around
I
Piece
thought you
4
did,
because
you
it
see.
isn't operational as yet. Do you
Yes,
know?
but I think in your answer to David, you did
Okay,
suggest
well, that was
it
not the
definitely.
intention.
So,
What I heard, but
No, because
So-
Piece 4 isn't
so just
operational yet.
for the avoidance of doubt, which may only be in my mind, that is being explored, but there is no guarantee at the moment that a single penny will come from anywhere else but government departments.
Not at this point.
That's great. Thank you very much. Bronwyn McGann.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I am familiar with Moy Regional and Moy Primary School in Moy County Tyrone. I had a number of engagements with the school, and what I do know is if the groundwork had not been done over the last number of years, a shared educational model would not have worked for them. So the groundwork was absolutely vital. I would appreciate it if you could give me any more information that you have on the development of that campus. You mentioned about you're hoping to receive business cases by the end of 2014.
The Department of Education, they'll be completing that business case process. We can certainly get what information that the department has in terms of the development work with those 3 campuses, see what we can find out and get back to you on that. But the business cases specifically would go to the Department of Education.
Right, okay. Just regarding the developing a significant programme of cross-community sporting events, you know, I'd just like us to give serious consideration to, you know, my own constituency where we have the fastest growing population in the north, and that's in Dungannon, and it is down to the ethnic minority population. And I know that the soccer clubs within the Dungannon area do a significant amount of work with that population. So I think, you know, that would be important to consider because it is a rural area. Well.
And just on that last point, DCAL, who are taking forward the cross-community sports programme, I'd reported earlier that they're running out a pilot. They haven't released the areas that will be in, but they have said that they will concentrate on participation from minority ethnic groups, people with disabilities and young women as well. And in terms of the whole urban-rural issue, we're very conscious of that within the context of implementing the strategy, and we've been working very closely with the Rural Community Network to ensure that we're engaging on those specific rural issues.
Thank you.
Okay. Brenda Hale.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for missing part of your presentation, and if you ever repeat yourself, I apologise again, but it's really on the back of what Chris said about the urban villages. Obviously, we're waiting for another 2 to be identified. I mean, are they going to be specific to Greater Belfast? And is one of the essentials criteria to be they have to be an interface area? Because I know that many areas in my valley, my constituency of Lagan Valley would benefit, but they're not interface. But I mean, they would benefit greatly from the core aspects of the programme.
It's now the other 2 haven't been announced, and I haven't seen any suggested locations for those. It's not to say they will all be in the Belfast area, or indeed that they have to be what would be traditionally viewed as an interface community.
Thank you.
Jimmy Spratt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of minor points. Just to go back quickly to the 10 shared villages, or to the 10 shared campuses. Am I right in understanding that 3 of those are a business case?
They've started the business case process, and the hope is that those will be completed by the end of this year.
Okay. In terms then of the Pathways to Work programme, which Dell Department are leading on, my understanding is the hope was to increase to 10,000 places per year in relation to that programme. Where are we with that, and what has Dell actually delivered?
Okay, well, at the minute they've been doing a lot of stakeholder engagement to inform the design of the programme. Now, proposals were submitted for pilots at the end of September, and they're going to be, they probably are in the process of selecting those at the minute, and then following a development phase during October this month and next month, pilot applications will be submitted in early December with a view to commencing pilots in January of next year. From Dell colleagues, it's my understanding that those pilots will take a number of formats and structures, and the department's very very keen to get a variety in terms of delivery to find out what ultimately will work really well in the final programme. And it is very much a case of no one size fits all. So that's why they're looking at various delivery mechanisms for these pilots. And there'll be very important work going on through the Department for Employment and Learning to evaluate what's coming out of all those pilots to inform the final design, to make sure that we get the best possible good relations outcomes from the programme.
Okay, and just go to another aspect that you mentioned in relation to taking down of barriers and the opening of gates, and you give us a few examples. In terms of, and I think this has been public, I mean, in lots of areas, communities are not ready for barriers to be taken down. What has the Department of Justice done to liaise with those areas to try and get some of these barriers down, given that in some areas there's ongoing problems?
That's absolutely right, and the key component of all of this is having the community buy-in and involvement before any barrier can come down. There are some areas where stakeholder engagement and buy-in has been quite minimal, and we're actively working with DOJ at the moment to see how best to take forward engagement in those specific areas. Donna, you might be across more of the detail.
Do you know exactly what DOJ have done?
Well, they're working very closely with the IFI-funded Peace Walls programme with the 7 partners. Those are across Belfast and Derry, Londonderry. And they're now working with us to explore where we can increase that engagement with the community where it hasn't been done, perhaps in East Belfast, Shankill, outside the Greater Belfast area. And we have tried to ring-fence some additional funding that we might be able to get some expansion of that programme of 7 groups rolled out this year.
Has anything been done in the South Belfast area?
We don't have a group in the South Belfast area at the moment.
Well, I mean, there are some barriers there.
Yes.
You don't think DOJ should build them?
Yeah, I think we have established a good model. We want to actively roll that out. And get more engagement with the community. And I think you're very right to say sometimes the community isn't ready to go to the full engagement over the removal of the barriers. It's about the peace building and the creation of the conditions to remove the peace walls. And DOJ and ourselves are working with IFI on the Peace Impact Programme, which is sort of a stage earlier and the Peace Walls programme about bringing community which perhaps hasn't been engaged in peace building to date together to start those discussions with the relevant agencies.
Thanks, Chair.
You're welcome. Lindsay, back in March we were advised that the 7 headline actions were under consideration within the department in advance of a ministerial panel meeting on the 27th of March. Could you update us on the status of those plans, and indeed can we have sight of them?
Again, that ministerial panel meeting didn't happen at the end of March due to unforeseen circumstances. The meeting happened on the 2nd of October, so for that reason we're working with departments to revise their costs and their final project plan designs, and I can certainly find out if those are something could be shared with the committee.
Okay, it had to be postponed on the 27th of March and it couldn't be convened until the 2nd of October?
It was challenging getting a date. We were very keen, as I said, to have all ministers there and all departments represented.
Sure.
And that was the challenge.
So is that reflective of the challenge of trying to work on that sort of cross-departmental basis?
Not at all. I think we've actually very good and positive working relationships. I should say during that time the Good Relations Programme Board continued to meet on a bi-monthly basis in the absence of the ministerial panel being able to secure an agreeable date to everyone.
I don't ask to imply that there's anything other but good relations. I'm just worried about the actual logistical difficulty of pulling everybody together, because we tend to work vertically and you're trying to work horizontally through government.
I think that's why it's really vital to have the programme board there and meeting regularly.
In terms of the urban villages, some respondents, we're obviously very interested in what people think of this. Concern expressed that, quote, the 2 urban villages programmes announced appear to have little or no good relations content and local minority communities appear to be excluded from the areas of benefit. Is that valid as a criticism?
Certainly, it's something we're very conscious of and a criticism that we have heard, and for that reason we're working very closely with the Investment Board at this stage in terms of structuring the stakeholder engagement and to build in those good relations outcomes that we clearly want to see from urban villages. As it's a headline action and together building a united community, good relations will be a key outcome that we'll be looking to see, and that's where it'll be very important to factor that in the design stage with stakeholders and all sections of the community.
Another observation on a general basis was that to a certain extent some people perceive it's top-heavy in terms of statutory input, and civic society hasn't had the role that it might have had.
And as we're at a very advanced stage in setting up the thematic subgroups, I think that will be the key place where other sectors, organisations, stakeholders and the all-important practitioners will be involved. I would also say we're working actively with the Community Relations Council at the minute as well to develop a structured and constructive programme of stakeholder engagement across the 4 strategic priorities of Together Building a United Community, in an attempt to engage much more, recognising the practice and the work that has gone in over very many years and what we can learn from that practice to ensure that it's practice-informed policy.
In terms of engagement, the co-design process for the United Youth seemed to be deemed to be a very good model. Is it being rolled out across the other 6?
Yeah, certainly to lesser, stronger
to the extent that it fits.
But it certainly is, and it's something that we also rolled out in light of the review of good relations funding.
Mm-hmm. And that January event, you had 300 youth in the Waterfront Hall. Do you update them?
Yes, in fact, the Department for Employment and Learning, they have stayed in touch and carried forward that engagement. They held a follow-up youth event, actually a 2 or 3 night residential in Coromila at the beginning of September, and they re-engaged with the vast majority of the same young people that we had engaged with in January at the Waterfront through the organisations that we had engaged with to ensure that continuity, so it'll be important for them to build on that.
Right, and no frustration coming back in terms of nothing's happened?
I think there had been frustrations voiced at that, but more in terms of the engagement. I think the young people very much welcome being part of the process, and they will be part of the Dell design team. And our own Junior Minister McCann attended that residential, was able to hear it firsthand, the young people's views.
Yeah, I think my interest is more to what extent they understand and accept the process and the length of time that goes into a process. I know if I promised one of my teenagers in January I'm going to do something good for you, and you got to February without delivering, I'd be in trouble.
Yeah, well, I think that has been balanced against them appreciating and welcoming the opportunity to be engaged and to contribute to the design to make sure that it's something that's right and meets their specific needs as young people.
So they see the value?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Well, John,
Chair, can I ask you a quick supplementary? Sorry. Can I, in relation to the ministerial panel, you had said obviously that community relations kind of weren't invited to the ministerial panel. Can I, given the fact that out of approximately £10 million budget per year on good relations funding, that you direct approximately £6 million via the Community Relations Council, and given the length of time in which they've been engaged in community relations work in Northern Ireland, why were they not asked to put forward a representative onto the ministerial panel?
I think they hadn't been invited because at the time it was thought that within the context of establishing the Equality and Good Relations Commission, and as I say, we're actively looking at whether it's one person from each of those organisations at the next ministerial panel meeting, or how best that representation could be included at the next meeting.
So it may be included at a future date then?
Yes, that's something we're looking at.
Okay, Chair, there was a comprehensive review of the structure, delivery and impact of existing funding delivery mechanisms carried out, which I understand is completed. Is there a date for publication of the report?
The report, we've been working with SIB over the last number of weeks to finalise that report, and that will shortly be with our ministers, and would hope to re-engage them with stakeholders following that.
Or were we not a stakeholder?
Yes, that would be part of that.
Well, why were we not engaged prior to writing the final report?
I believe the committee were invited to the stakeholder engagement sessions on it.
Okay.
Didn't go, Chris.
Thanks, Chair.
You're welcome. Okay, Donna, Michael and Lindsay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, members, on the same theme, this is our final item. It's our own inquiry, and we received over 60 written submissions. A whole variety of organisations and sectors. Also, we had a late submission from Belfast City Council, also the Department of Justice, and indeed a submission from the Department of Social Development received just before today's meeting. So in terms of quality and quantity, I think we've done very well in terms of what we received. We did agree to ask Assembly Research also to compile a list of potential expert witnesses whom we might consider inviting to give oral evidence, and that paper is at page 115 of your meeting pack. We've also had a draft inquiry plan, which is in table papers at page 46, and I think this little session would be useful if we can agree some way forward, although members may wish to reflect. Can I also thank Karen, who's done all the spade work in terms of pulling it together, analysing it, and putting this initial early emerging themes type paper together. Karen, could you say a few words for us, please?
Absolutely. As the Chair has said, we've had over 60 submissions, and I think the diversity of groups that have responded represents the breadth of engagement and the breadth of experience and expertise that is out there in some of these areas. I think in terms of the inquiry, through the submissions, we had said that we would see what the early themes emerging were and then use that as a focus then in terms of taking oral evidence, perhaps some visits and engaging in some further research. And I think the written submissions to date provide us with the opportunity to maybe look at things from a slightly different angle. There's maybe some good news stories in there in terms of work that is going on the ground that maybe hasn't been heard about or isn't well known, and also just in terms of committee's own priorities in terms of engagement and in terms of reaching hard to reach groups. There's some opportunities for us in there as well. In terms of the paper that's in your table pack, it just sets out the background to why this inquiry is kind of underway, and then just highlights again the terms of reference for the inquiry, and then it moves on to a table which has tried to identify the key themes coming out against the terms of reference that we have established. So I'm not intending to go through it word by word, but I just want to highlight some particular areas and some areas then where the committee might think about taking evidence and who they might consider taking evidence from. In relation to our first terms of reference, it was about theory and practice, looking for examples of a good practice, looking at both locally and internationally. And I think through the evidence that we've received, there's an abundance of examples of good practice locally. As the Chair has said, Assembly Research has provided us with a list of academics who might be appropriate to invite to give evidence, and they might again help us explore a bit further the issues around theory and practice. So if members were content for staff to explore some of those academics and to see if they would be willing to come and give evidence. Two of the list have provided evidence. Colin Knox and Duncan Morrow is in a broader paper from the University of Ulster, and others have been mentioned, like Brandon Hamber have been mentioned through some of the submissions that we've had coming through. Also in terms of the Contested Space and Interface programme, which is, there's been a little bit of interest in the buddy programme through this committee, and it's been funded by the department, OFMDFM and Atlantic Philanthropy. Some of those projects are ongoing, and it might be interesting for us to go and visit some of those projects that are continuing on until the end of March. A lot of discussion in the session there with departmental officials was around the responsibilities of other departments. Members will remember the Delivering Social Change event that this committee held last year, and it might be useful to have a similar event where departmental representatives are invited to engage with them in relation to their responsibilities and experiences. There's some interest in emerging theory and practice around the idea of shared space, and maybe or an organisation like the Environment Link or Landscape Institute in Northern Ireland might not be the first ones that might come to mind in terms of coming to give evidence, but there might be something interesting to explore there around shared space and even the issue around the urban villages, community gardens and that sort of thing. There's also
there's an organisation called the Forum for Alternative Belfast that looks specifically at kind of physical infrastructure in terms of promoting community cohesion that might be useful to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're, if members have other suggestions of places to visit or organisations to contact, then please let us know about that. Another group of people that we might consider inviting is in relation to the District Council Good Relations Officers. There's been a little bit of talk about the funding that the department provides in relation to overall good relations, and that's not only then in terms of the projects and the role of the good relations officers within the councils, but in terms of looking down the terms of reference at how communities can be involved in decision making, the community planning process that's going to be integral to the new council structures is something that is suggested by a number of respondents that it might be something that would be worth this committee exploring. We asked for views on, the committee asked for views on what good relations means, and also in relation to how sectarianism can be addressed. A number of organisations provided suggestions and information around a definition for good relations, which hasn't been defined in law or in terms of the policy. And members might want to consider inviting maybe the Equality Commission, Community Relations Council, Human Rights Commission or the Equality Coalition to give evidence. They are not all in agreement necessarily with what a definition might be, but it might be useful to hear their different perspectives. There was a strong theme emerging around integrated education. Now, the committee has previously decided that issues relating to integrated education should sit with the Education Committee, who are undertaking their own inquiry into shared and integrated education, although the committee has received a specific invite from the Northern Ireland Council for Integrated Education to visit Hazelwood, where the school is on the interface. Another option for the committee to explore is mixed communities, where relations are between mixed communities are highlighted, for example, with Ballinafy Community Development Association, and looking at some of the work that's involved there. A theme that came up time and again was in relation to mental health and intergenerational trauma, and committee, in terms of the final report, might want to make recommendations with the Department of Health in this regard, but it might also want to consider those issues maybe separately to the inquiry, because that's probably quite a big issue in and of itself, but it does relate to some other areas of interest to the committee in terms of victims and survivors issues as well. We had some responses from young people's groups, and in particular the Bites Project did focus groups with their groups across Northern Ireland, and they have specifically asked what's going to happen with this information, and has asked to maybe meet with MLAs to discuss some of these issues further. Bites Project works with young people who are not in employment or education or training, some of them who are in very difficult circumstances, and that might again assist the committee in terms of reaching hard to reach groups as well and engaging with those people. And our education colleagues have offered to cooperate with us if we wanted to put something together in relation to that. Also, Bronwyn mentioned sport there towards the end, and we had a joint response from GAA, IRFU and IFA together, and so there might be something interesting to explore there with the three codes and what they have been working on together. So those are some of the emerging themes coming through. We had at one stage discussed the possibility of a special advisor. Members might consider it's not maybe necessary at the minute, but might also want to keep that on the table in case that's something that they want to think about in future. And then in terms of actually going out and seeing, there's a few suggested, or a few projects that suggested possibility for visits. I've already mentioned the Contested Space Interface programme. They have a programme up in Derry, Londonderry, the Waterside Partnership. There's Interaction Belfast, the Fourth Spring Intercommunity Project. The Environment Link, they have the Suffolk Interface Pockets Plots project, which is intergenerational and cross-community, and also then the Rural Community Network will be able to provide examples of projects in rural areas. If members wanted to go a bit further afield, there's a research paper again on your table of papers which has been in packs before, and it identified some areas in Europe, for example the former Yugoslavian countries. Now that might not be so practical to try and go and visit at this time of year because it'll be very cold, but there's other options in England, the north of England, in terms of community tension and community cohesion that might be of interest to visit maybe towards the end of this year or early next year if members wanted staff to explore those opportunities without any commitments at this stage. So it's really, those are the sort of things that are coming out. Those are sort of ideas in terms of how to progress things and whether you're happy enough that staff start pursuing some of those
Yeah,
options.
that's perfect. Thank you, Karen. That's a lot of work you put in, and on behalf of the committee, thank you. So, members, there's some kind of general questions which, you know, I'm very relaxed if everybody wants to go away and reflect on for the next week. But the key questions, it seems to me, are which witnesses, because we'll obviously not be able to go round everybody, and I'm sure everybody has their own. I mean, Chris has already mentioned one. Everybody has groups that they think they would, and people they'd like to hear from. Visits, I think we should, as a matter of principle, yeah, but what's the mix between urban and rural? Are we just sticking local, or are we going to go national? Are we going to go international in the pack? Certainly there was one international initiative which kind of leapt off the page at me, but again, you know, to a certain extent there's a personal preference with this. And the specialist advisor, do we need one? If we do feel we need one, could we agree one? Would we have to have two? So there's a lot of issues. And I think it might be best if we reflect and come back in and around those broad areas next week. There's no point talking about how we select if there's going to be a kind of reasonable agreement on who we think the key players are, but if there's a big long list, then we'll cross the bridge. Anybody?
Sounds fair enough.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Well, once again, Cam, thank you very much indeed. So, members, forward work programme to the end of November is at page 124. In the absence of comment, I will take it your content and ask if there's any other business.
Just, Chair, I know you like raising the departmental papers arriving late, but the NIPSO paper arrived late too. It's in the additional pack, so I don't think that should be overlooked.
Not the only one, Jimmy.
No, the NIPSO paper, but I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't get it, to have a look at it, have a discussion before, you know, on any changes that they're proposing, like of today. Surely we could get it a couple of days, even emailed to us.
Well, sure, but actually there weren't any changes today. We were only discussing the...
No, but even the stuff that was on it, it's just a point maybe for the future in case there's any, so we can keep this thing speeding along.
Oh, sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and indeed some of this stuff that we're discussing was tabled, but then we're assimilating info just in. Okay, well, members, then next meeting Wednesday the 5th of November, 2 p.m, room 30. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
This is the Northern Ireland